Good day. Before I proceed with this video, just to remind everybody who's watching us on Rumble, where we're now increasingly on Rumble's homepage, that if you press the red maroon button at the top of a video, one of our videos that you're watching on Rumble, that will take you directly to our locals homepage, where you will find the Duran videos, my videos, Alex Christophero's videos, our Duran community, all of us busy commenting, discussing events and publishing exclusive content there. So to proceed with the situation today, it looks as if over the last few hours that there's been a major escalation of shelling. So far it seems to be only shelling across the conflict line in the Donbass. Now, there's lots of debates and arguments about who's responsible, and there was a muddled story yesterday about an attack on a kindergarten, which some people in the Western media claimed was a Russian false flag, apparently under the mistaken impression that the kindergarten in question was located inside the Donbass territory controlled by the militia, whereas in fact it was located in Ukraine itself. So there's been a lot of discussion and concerns about this, and of course it was all amplified by rather confused and muddled comments from President Biden himself, who gave a somewhat chaotic series of comments to the media as he was preparing to fly off, presumably to Camp David in Marine Force One, about him expecting a Russian invasion of Ukraine within the next few days. And of course, we've also had a rather scrappy meeting at the UN Security Council, where the United States and Britain again castigated Russia. Russia got support from China. The Russians complained about genocide in the Donbass, and most of the other countries remained quiet and refused to take sides. And notably, the comments from Germany and France were much quieter and calmer also than those by their British and American friends. Anyway, that's all been overshadowed by the steady deterioration of the situation on the conflict line. As I said, there's now shelling going on. Shelling was very heavy yesterday, Thursday, and it has escalated further today. And within the last few hours, there's been an announcement by the leaders of the two breakaway republics, the Donetsk and Lugansk People's Republics, that they are trying to organize an evacuation of residents, to be precise, of women, children and old people, that they're being evacuated to Russia. And there's talk that the men are all being called up to prepare to fight, to defend their homes in the event of an invasion, an attack on the Donbass republics, which they both claim is now imminent. And they're linking this to a visit to the front line by President Zelensky of Ukraine. They are saying that he went there presumably with the intention of checking the situation to see whether or not everything was ready for this offensive, and that they expect him to give the order for the offensive at any time. So they're saying that they're preparing for this offensive and they're evacuating their women and children. Now, the Ukrainians are insisting that they have no plan to launch such an offensive. The Ukrainian Foreign Minister, Kuleba, has denied it. So has the Ukrainian Defense Ministry, the Ukrainian Armed Forces Chief. And the Russians, for their part, are remaining silent at the moment, except that President Putin, in a meeting with the Belarusian President Alexander Lukashenko, has again said that it's time for Ukraine to sit down and talk to the leaders of the breakaway republics of the Donbass, the Donetsk and Lugansk People's Republics, as they are required to do under the Minsk Agreement. So where is all this going? Are we indeed going to see a Ukrainian offensive in the Donbass? Is there indeed going to be fighting? Will that provoke a Russian reaction? Well, the Russians have been talking about genocide, and that's what they said in their report to the Security Council. The Duma has passed a resolution authorizing Putin to recognize the Donetsk republics, the Donetsk and Donbas republics, the Donetsk and Lugansk People's Republics as independent republics. And I suspect that in the event that there really was a Ukrainian offensive or some kind of escalation in the Donbass, then this Russian counteroffensive that we've been hearing so much about and been talking about for so long would probably happen. Though I suspect not immediately. I suspect that the first step that the Russians would make would be to send their representatives to the UN Security Council, convene a Security Council meeting, find out, make a proposal for a pullback to the ceasefire lines. We'd see how that would be received. And then only as diplomatic processes were run through, only then would we probably see that Russian counteroffensive take place. And in the event that there is a Russian counteroffensive and the Ukrainians are indeed thrown back, then I suspect that Putin will finally do what that Duma resolution empowers him to do, which is to recognize the independence of the two Donbas republics. And of course, at that point, the West would impose its sanctions. Over the course of the meeting between Lukashenko and Putin, Putin said that the West will impose its sanctions irrespective of whatever Russia does. It's essentially a Western decision. It's not something that Russia has any control over. And at that point, the sanctions would be imposed. And of course, we would then be in a completely new situation. By the way, there are reports coming out of the leadership of the Donetsk and Lugansk republics that in the event that the Ukrainian offensive is defeated, they expect the Ukrainian government to evacuate Kiev, and that preparations to do that are already underway. Well, that's the reports. That's what we've been hearing everybody saying. But I repeat again that the Ukrainians, for what it's worth, are denying that they have offensive plans. And as of this moment in time, I have to say that I do wonder whether that Ukrainian offensive is indeed going to be launched and whether it is indeed even really threatened. It seems to me that launching an invasion, an attack on the Donbass, which, as the Russians have repeatedly said, would put the very existence of Ukraine in jeopardy, is something that Ukrainian leaders might be very unwilling to do. So we will see what happens over the next couple of days and hours. But it seems to me that now the danger is that events in the Donbass, on the Donbass front line, will start to develop their own logic. And regardless of what anybody intends, be it on the Ukrainian side, the Russian side, or the Donbass militia side, things could easily get out of control, in which case, of course, we would see a possible escalation with all the consequences that have been talked about for so long. Now, I'm going to, again, here express my own opinion. I don't think there is a Russian desire to launch an invasion of Ukraine. I don't think this is part of what the Russians have been intending to do at all. I think they've been pushing and pushing hard for a settlement of the Ukrainian conflict along the lines of the Minsk agreement. They've been making progress with this, with signs that Ukraine seems to be moving step by step towards some kind of proposals for autonomy for the Donbass, and that these proposals will be put forward to the trilateral contact group where representatives of the Donbass republics participate. So that would be a roundabout way of starting negotiations. And the Russians have also forced the United States and the Western powers to admit that they would not fight to defend Ukraine. And we've now had comments, including comments from German Chancellor Olaf Scholz, essentially admitting that there isn't any prospect, any immediate prospect, probably any prospect of Ukraine ever joining NATO. So I would have thought that this is not something that the Russians would want. I don't see why the Russians would want to start a war in Ukraine when, from their point of view, things are going their way. And to be frank, I can't really see the logic either of the Ukrainians starting a war in the Donbass at this time, when, as I said, the only outcome would be a military defeat for themselves, or at least the most likely outcome would be a military defeat for themselves and the humiliation of Ukraine and perhaps its subsequent collapse. So it seems to me that for the moment, that still seems to be the calculus. But of course, there are always going to be voices that are arguing otherwise. There's probably pressure on Zelensky, people telling Zelensky in the background, perhaps people putting pressure on Zelensky, people saying to Zelensky, look, we're now in serious danger of being forced into making major concessions, which we don't want to make, on the Minsk agreement, on NATO membership. We're in danger of losing, in other words, the entire Maidan project. So let's try and see what we can do in the Donbass. Perhaps Russian statements that they will act to protect the Donbass are a bluff. And even if they're not, and we're defeated, well, from our point of view, from the point of view of those of us who want to create a united, monolingual, monocultural Ukraine within NATO and the European Union, that prize becoming increasingly out of our reach, well, if we start this war and we lose, well, we're not going to lose our prize because, in effect, we are already in the process of losing it. So there will be those people, probably in Ukraine and Kiev, who are whispering these thoughts or perhaps even shouting these thoughts in Zelensky's direction. And of course, it's always problematic how much in control of things Zelensky himself is. But then I suspect that there are other voices in Moscow, people in the Kremlin, and I've discussed this before, people who are quietly telling Putin, look, all our problems in the West, 90% of our problems in the West revolve around the issue of Ukraine. It's this issue of Ukraine that is creating all these tensions between us and the West. Sooner or later, the Western powers are going to impose all these sanctions they've been talking about anyway. Given that that is so, let us solve this problem of Ukraine now, once and for all, get it out of the way, absorb whatever sanctions damage is imposed on us. After a couple of years, the West will start to talk to us again, and maybe we will face much condemnation and much criticism, but in the long term, over time, our strategic position will be made stronger. And I am sure that this kind of talk has been happening in Moscow for some time. I've mentioned it in previous videos, and it's conceivable that if there is a fight now in the Donbass, that those talks, those words will strengthen and become more forceful and will gain more traction, causing Putin, perhaps, who is obviously somebody inclined to listen to these sort of views, though up to now consistently rejecting them, but perhaps he might be willing to listen to them also. So though I can't really see that on the basis of their present policies, either the Ukrainians or the Russians want a war in the Donbass, I'm afraid the reality is that over the next couple of days, if the situation continues to escalate in the way that it has done, it's possible that it may come. Anyway, we will see what happens. President Macron of France is apparently once more working the phones, trying to get the situation in the Donbass to calm down. There was supposed to be an agreement a couple of weeks ago in Paris to take steps to strengthen the ceasefire, which, as we see, none of that's been implemented at the moment. We will see what happens. There probably will be more diplomatic action of some kind over the next few hours. But of course, if there is an escalation, if there is more fighting in the Donbass, if things do get out of control there, then indeed we could finally see that crisis in Europe that's been talked about and hammered on for so many months, ever since October. And of course, when that happens, we will of course see many people who will tell us that this was of course the plan right from the beginning. The Americans will say, well, Putin, the Russians always intended to invade Ukraine, even though all the actual indications suggest the contrary. And of course the Russians, perhaps with more cause, will say that all this talk, all this badgering of Western countries over sanctions, all this escalatory rhetoric that we've seen over the last few weeks and months, all of that was indeed intended to pave the ground for this conflict in Ukraine, whose purpose clearly is to get a sanctions package imposed, which will see the end of Nord Stream 2, which is, or looks like, it was the major point of this exercise. Well, as I said, we will see what happens. We're not yet in a conflict situation. We're not yet in an outright war situation. We will see whether this evacuation decision that the two Donbass republics have announced, that they're saying that they're going to move their civilians into Russia. We'll see whether that really does happen. We'll see what actually takes place over the next few days and hours. But obviously, if there is a major fight, if there's real battles in the Donbass, then anything could happen. Dramatic events could take place. Events which, by the way, are not unprecedented in European terms. But we will no doubt find out in a few hours or days what will happen. And of course, to the extent that I can, I will try to keep up to date with events and continue to report them. Thank you for joining me again for this program. I look forward to you joining me again for more for future programs, both on this channel and on our main channel, the Duran. I'd remind you again that we are present. We have a thriving community on Locals, where we do lots of geopolitical and other news, and where we have a thriving community which you are very welcome to join. You will find links under this video, and of course you can also find us if you're watching our videos on Rumble. And as I said, all you need to do is go and press that red maroon button at the top. And we're also present on multiple other platforms, including of course SuperU and others. And you can find links under this video too. And of course, if you want to support our work, you can support us via Patreon and Subscribestar. You find links also under this video. And you can also go to our shop and buy the amazing things that you will find there. Our magic mugs, our hats, our hoodies, our sweatshirts, our t-shirts, and all the rest. And of course, last but not least, please remember to tick the like button if you like this video, and to press and to check your subscription to this channel. Thank you for joining me again today. I look forward to you joining me again soon, and have a good day until then.